Good evening.
Hello, Rabbi. How are you?
Oh Hashem, thank you. Okay, so we're going to continue a bit, Yosef. So we said, right, about the kopach, which is the one pot thing. Mishnah Sham, it's a Mishnah there in Lamed Chet Amud Bet. Kopach she'esiku bekash bevala. If this kopach was lit with straw, hareu kikira kigif, it's like a stove. The gifet, if it was done with alipits or betzim or with the wood, hareu kitanu. So then it's like oven. This is what the Torah said. So then it says, right, Parash Gemara explains in Gemara, Shekopach hu makom shfitat keder echad. Kopach has only one place for one pot. V'nafish havle medechira, and therefore it's hotter than the stove. Ve'zutar meditanu, but it's less than the oven. Okay. Umashma dekeshesiku begefet ve'etzim. So that implies that if they ignited it with the alipits of the wood, so then it's like totally like an oven. It's forbidden. Even if he raked out the coals. Okay. But if they do it with straw, and then it's totally like a stove. So then it's going to be allowed without any raking out of the coals. That's what the Ran says also. Okay. Rambam also seems to say like that. So he says there is a wonder on Rabbeinu, the Torah, that he wrote here and also in Remazim, that if it was ignited with straw, so then it's allowed by way of breaking out the coals. That even without doing that, Shara will be allowed, dumya dekira, just like the oven, the stove. It could be that the reason is because what he wrote, the Rosh wrote. That in the commentary of the Mishnah, halach is like this, Rabbi. That he qualifies the Mishnah as being talking about the kopach, which is raked out. It says, nevertheless, if they ignited it with alapits ve'etzim or wood, harehu ketanur, then it's like a oven. Ad connection, that's the end of it. Okay. Ad connection, that's the end of it. Umashma the Rabbeinu, so that implies to Rabbeinu, the tour. Since the Mishnah is talking about the kopach which is raked out, also the first part which teaches about the straw, that's like a oven, that's like a stove. The reason is because it's raked out. But if it wasn't, asur, it would be forbidden. So it says that's not really so clear cut. Tatav Rabbeinu Yerucham. This rabbi says, B'chelek Gimel, Nireh ki bekirot shelanu. So it says, it seems like with our stoves, and hefresh ben makom shvitat kedera achad shvitat kederot. There's no difference between one hole and two holes. He says, with ours, it's all the same. Why? Because one is not hotter than the other. So therefore, you can place it there, the pot, when it's raked out, just like with a stove. Hard connection, that's the end of it. Okay. So comments on that, the Bet Yosef. The lo yodati ma efresh ben yesh ben says, I don't know what the difference is between kopach dizman chachmei Talmud, the kopach for the rabbis Talmud, the kopach didan and our kopach. Shafa pi sheotam ayu shel cheres v'shelanu hem shel tit. So it says, even though there is a difference, that theirs was made out of clay and ours is made out of heat, right? Which is like mud. I don't know, God knows. Yeah. So it says that's not really any significant difference there. To differentiate between them. It says also the name of the Ran. Regarding what you said, that nowadays we put the chamin, right, which is like the cholent, on top of the stove. So he says, so he says, because our ovens, they're like kopach, they only have place for one pot. When it comes to kopach, right, breaking it out doesn't really do anything. Ad connection is the end of it. Okay. Let's move on. And it says, he says, right, that Rashi and the Ri paskin, if it's already machal ben drusai, meaning what? It's already like partially cooked, as we said, etc., etc. So regarding that, it says Bet Yosef. Fine, it's better, but the kama b'mash katabti. So it says it was already explained regarding what I wrote. Shehem poskim kechanania, right? They poskim like Hanania. The Amar kol shu kemachal ben drusai. That he says, as long as it's partially cooked, mutar shoto al gabe kira. You're allowed to put it on the stove. Shena gufa uktuma, which is not baked out. The huadin al gabe, and the same thing also applies regarding kopach, or al gabe tanur, or on top of the oven. Umay lo iten tikatane matiti. So that, what does it mean when it says don't put, like it says in the Mishnah, lo yachazir, that means don't put it back. Aval leashot mashin, but this is when it comes to just leaving it there, we can leave it there. Umatnitin de tanuk, the kopach nami linyan chazarahem. This is also the Mishnah that talks about the oven, and the kopach is also talking about returning it, that item, back to the stove. And it's not talking about just placing it there. So I already wrote, according to them, right, when is it allowed to leave it there? In which scenario, which manner? Okay. Let's move on. מה שכתב רבינו, וכל זה בעניין לצורך הלילה, and that which the Torah said, right? This is all talking about where you leave it for the night, right? וכן מה שכתב בתחילת הסימן, and that was also that which you wrote, beginning of the chapter, אסור ליתן עליה תבשיל מבעוד יום. You're not allowed to put a dish there before Shabbat. להשותו עליה, to leave it there לצורך הלילה, for the night. יש לפרש, so he says there is to explain the לצורך הלילה לאו דווקא. So it doesn't really mean exactly precisely for the needs of the night. דהוא הדין במשהה לצורך מחר. Same thing also would apply if he's leaving it for tomorrow. אלא משום דאורחא דמיעוטא שמי שמניח. So he says, but it's just a common way that whoever places כדרתו לצורך מחר, his pot for the sake of tomorrow, hu matmin, he insulates it, כדי שלא תצטנן, in order that it shouldn't get cold. והמניחה לצורך הלילה. אינו מטמין. Let me read this one more time. I didn't catch this. What was that? So it says like this. And when you're placing it for the night, he says, "Eno matmit." The tzorach halayla en matmin. He doesn't insulate it for the night. It's not necessary to insulate it. Eno matmin. Nachat letzorach halayla. So he used the language of the needs of the night. Komar kol tzorach halayla shelo itmin. That means that all the needs of the night, they didn't insulate it. They're short the dafka nachat letzorach halayla. So it says it could be that it's dafka, precisely saying for the needs of the night, literally. Because if it was for tomorrow, it will be allowed in any manner. To leave it on top of the stove, as we said, even though it's not raked out. or betanur, or with an oven, afilu itchil bashel, even if it started to cook, v'lo higia, and still didn't get to the level of nachal ben rusai, which is partially cooked. Because when it's for the needs of tomorrow, he divides his mind from it. And he's not going to come to stir it. Like it says in Kolbo, B'Agot Marechi, פרק ב', אבל לא ראיתי בדברי שום פוסק סולתם שחילק בכך. But he says, I didn't see any other posek besides them that made this differentiation. Okay. Umash Katab, and that which he wrote, Rabbeinu, the tour, Mechalek ben Shial Atmana, to differentiate between leaving it there and Hatmana, which is insulation. Hu midivre, it's not the same thing. Hu midivre Rosh, that's what comes from Rosh, Kira, over there. V'chen Katab Sham Aran, also Aran wrote this, V'shem Agyonim, Nein Agyonim. Udlo Keperesh Rashi, not like the Perush of Rashi, Amatnitin and the Mishnah, Darish Perek Kira. Teresh Perek Kira, in the beginning of Perek Kira. Ad Shegrof, until he breaks it out. Mishum de Mosif Hava, because it adds heat. Katav alav Ran, says Ran regarding that. Katav ken lefi shehu, he wrote like this because in Faresh ze Perek, because he explains this chapter haf be'atmana, even regarding insulation. The chol shegaruf v'katum, that whatever you have, right, which is breaked out, svira le'de'enu musif haval. He holds that in a case like that, it doesn't add any heat. Ken katav be'arbe mekomot. He wrote like that in many places. Be'alacha, in the halacha. Be'hu zal dacha debarad. But he deflected that, his words. He holds that, no, we're not talking about insulation here. Just leaving it there. Because of this, so whenever you have a case where it's breaked out, there is recognition, and now he diverts his mind from it. That he won't do, therefore he won't come to stir the coals. Shara, so then it will be allowed. So it says in Magid, Shechem Dat Rambam, the Rambam also holds this way. The matnitin of the Mishnah, B'lishhot belo atmana, talking about a case where he just leaves it there, but not insulation. And that same thing also is the opinion of Hagaot, right? The Pek Gimel over there. Shkatru v'zilashonam. They wrote like this: even though you're allowed to leave that pot on top of the stove, that has coals in there, boarot, which are flaming. But if he did insulation, like they're accustomed to do, so then he revealed his intention, that he is particular that it shouldn't get cold. That's forbidden. Okay. It's not, as we learn in the Mishnah, and tomnin bedavar mosif habal. We shouldn't insulate with something which adds heat. Even if the pot is totally cooked, the dish. That's what it says in Sefer Truma. בספר המצוות, also this מצווה, בספר, ודלא כרביה, not like רביה, שכתב דאין חילוק בין להשעות על גבי אש, that he says that there's no difference between leaving on top of the fire, בין להטמין בתוכה, or to insulate it, right, inside. Idi ve'idi shara, they're both allowed. Okay, עד כאן that's the end of it. Interesting. והמורדכי בריש פרק קירה, so he says, but the Mordechai כתב בשם אור זרוע, he writes the name of this rabbi, ומותר להשעות הקדרה על גבי הגחלים, ממש. He says you're allowed to leave it even on top of the coals. גם הישראל עצמו אפשר דמותר להסירה. So he says even a Jew himself, it's possible that he can remove it from there. הואיל ואינו מנענע הגחלים. Since he's not moving the coals around. ואינו מתכוון עליהם, and he's not really intending, he doesn't have intention on that. ואינו מזיזן ממקומן, so he's not really moving them from their place. ומשמע מלשונו, so it says, implies from his language, ששולי הקדרה נוגעים בגחלים, right? So as we said yesterday, right? That means that the bottom of the dish, the pot, is touching the coals. That's when we do call it, right, insulation in that scenario. But he says nevertheless it's allowed because he holds like Rashi, like Rashi and Rabbi. So he says, therefore, this din doesn't exist according to all these rabbis. Rashi, who argue with Rashi and Rabbi. And since the bottom of the dish, right, the pot, they're touching the coals, that's called insulation. That's already something else. Like the Russian, Ran said, but if you have a case where the bottom of the pot is not touching the coals, the kisak and he covered the pot from the top, right, with the clothing, right, the material. We're going to talk about that in this chapter, right, which talks about insulation, as we said. Very good. Let me just get a glass of water if you don't mind. 1 second. Oh. Okay. So then it says in Gemara, "Ba'u mina merav Chia barabba." They asked this rabbi, "Shachak kadera al gabe kira ubishla b'Shabbat ma'u." What about if he left the pot right on the stove and it cooked on Shabbat? So the dat Rashi, according to Rashi and Ri, the bashil v'la igia lemachal ben drusai mibaya. The question is when you cooked and it didn't get to machal ben drusai. That's the question, what happens then? Mibaya the elo bashil klal, because if it wasn't cooked at all, or bashil or it was cooked, higia lemachal ben drusai, and it came or level machal ben drusai. It will be allowed, the ashot, to leave it there. So, but according to Rif and the Rambam, even in that case where it got to Machal Ben Drusai, we still have a question here. For instance, it's not cooked for most people. Because if it did finish the cooking and it's still good when it congeals, I know Bayan the Besamuk, which can be our question later on, or close by. But if it's bad for it when it congeals, then it will be allowed. So Tosfot says, according to one answer, could be that he's asking about a case where it didn't cook at all. Because they only allow the case of the raw meat ela betanur, or with an oven, but not with a stove. The Mordechai also says that. Okay. So the conclusion there is that you shouldn't eat because the rabbis decreed on that. So what does that mean? They decreed on food that was cooked on Shabbat, not to eat it. Like Rabbi Yehuda said, the beginning they used to say, right, the person who cooks on Shabbat inadvertently, yochal, you should eat it. You can eat it. The mezid lo yochal. If you did it on purpose, you shouldn't eat it. Same thing also applies when you forgot it, but left it there by accident. Misharabu mashin mezid. Why? Because there are a lot of people who do this on purpose. And they say, "Oh, we forgot," but they really do it on purpose. Right? Chazru bekansu ala shochech. So therefore, they are also decreed on somebody who forgets. Wow. Interesting. It says in this book, the asur lemotzei Shabbat, that is forbidden after Shabbat, b'kdesh yasu. You need also time that it takes to cook that thing, to wait that time. That's what's in the Rambam. Pek Gimel. And we also asked another question there. Okay. What about if he actually did it on purpose, and he left it there on purpose? The loiv shita, that question was not answered. So he says this question is like the same as the first question. So what is he asking about? Even after the decree was made, hey, do they decree only on the ones who put it? But not for the family members. So Rabbeinu holds the tour that we go stringent. So he says, therefore, katav asur forbidden to everybody, for the whole family. Even to the one who did not shaha oto, the one who didn't put it. Even for him, it's forbidden. But it says, but the halachot ashiyah no Mordechai, katuv de lo mitzar ela ledideh. There it says different, right? It's only forbidden to him, not to the rest of the family. Aval lo le'acharine, not to the others. Medivri Arif nireh shehu gores. So it says, according to Rif, it seems like he has the text is avar v'shachach, that he did it on purpose, right? And he forgot it. Makom avar v'shihah. Instead of he transgressed and he left it there. So how did he explain it that way? That we're talking about where it got fully cooked, and it congeals and it's good for it. Even though they find the one who forgot it, maybe that's only when it wasn't fully cooked. But if it was fully cooked, even though it's good for it when it congeals, they didn't decree that. They didn't define him. But it wasn't answered that question, or kula, so therefore we go lenient. V'chen data Rambam per gimel. So the Rambam says, "V'Rabbeinu nireh shelo ala alav dato." So he says, what about the tour? It seems like he didn't really entertain the thought perush zeh of this explanation. Ufichach ukshalo data Rambam. Therefore, the opinion of the Rambam was difficult for him. Lama chilek ben avar l'shachach. Why did he differentiate with somebody who did it on purpose and forgot it? The habig gemara meite be'avar b'shihah l'shachach. Talks about a case where he transgressed and he left it there, as compared to the one who forgot it. Klamar de'ibaya kamaita aminan. Meaning to say that the first question we say, the Gemara nafak b'darash, he went out and he taught this lesson. Ham bashil b'Shabbat b'shogeg. If you cook on Shabbat, right, inadvertently, yochal, you can eat it. B'mezid lo yochal. If you did it on purpose, you cannot eat it. V'lo shana, and he didn't repeat that. V'asikna de'achi kamar. So we concluded this is what he said. V'lo shana ben mezid shechech. There's no difference between the one who does it on purpose or the one who forgot it. In any way, it's forbidden. They shouldn't come to defraud. So you see from there that the answers. But if he forgot, right, and he left it there, it's forbidden. Just like he transgressed and he left it there. The have mezid, because that's like purpose. The can some purpose. The can and the therefore you shouldn't differentiate between them. Then zukushia. So this is not really a question. According to the way the Rambam and the Rif explain, Bayashniya, the second question. We must make the apelo. They're talking about a case where it's congealing and it's good for it. that which we don't differentiate between we did it on purpose and forgot, or between doing it on purpose or forgetting. That's only if it wasn't fully cooked. But if it was fully cooked, but it's good for when it congeals. Then we write we differentiate between them. We have no choice. Since they asked a question regarding the one which is congealing and good for it, avar b'shachach, or the one who transgressed, or the one who forgot. What's the rule? Alma the pshita. So you see from there that it's obvious to him. Shima b'rab memezid asur. If he transgressed on purpose, it's forbidden. Teha lo ibaya ela be'avar b'shachach. Because he's only asking about a case where he transgressed and forgot. Ubayan de'avar b'shachach. And our question regarding when transgressed and forgot, Kivan the lo ipshita naktina lekula. Since it wasn't solved, this problem wasn't answered, so therefore he says we go lenient, right? Why is that? Because it's rabbinical. So in cases of doubt, we go lenient. Tma'ani al kolbo. So he says, I'm wondering about the kolbo. Shkatav the larif tavshil nish bashel. He writes regarding the rif, right? That dish which was cooked all the way. And it's good for it to congeal. Even if he transgressed, right, and he left it there, all the more so if he forgot it, inadvertently. Rif only allowed in a case where he forgot. The Rava gores avar b'shiha. So the Ravad his text says he transgressed and he left it there. That means inadvertently. Shikisavur mutarhu, because he thought that it was allowed. The kiltfen, it's even more light. Mishochech, to the one who forgets, right? The pasha that he did on purpose. The beshochech, because when you forgot it, even if it was fully cooked, it's forbidden. Okay, lots of stuff over here. That's one piece. I think there's another piece here. Aleph bet. This one. Okay. So let's just read this. It says, Katuv be'agal tashiri per kira. It says in the this book, if he returned it, right, inadvertently, we don't really know what the law is. Is it forbidden to eat it? Like similar to the case where he forgot it and left it there. Oh, Dilma, or perhaps Shani Hatam, maybe it's different there. שנתקן המאכל בשבת באיסור. Because there, this food, right, was designated to be forbidden on Shabbat. About the this is when it comes to returning it, it was already fitting to eat. So therefore, there's not much of a benefit there. However, it says, if the goy did it for the need of the Jew, it's allowed in this manner. Because the Jew is not really benefiting from it so much. That's the end of it. That's the end of the language. In this book, it says, wherever you transgress the rabbinical for prohibition, whether it's leaving it there or returning it, or its installation, you're not allowed to eat it, unless it was explicitly said that it's allowed. Lomar seems to me, says that you shouldn't say that even though in Gemara Lamed Chet Shara, that it allows it. Rabbi Yehuda allows it, Mr. Mikveralo, when it's congealing and bad for it. I know b'mashed davka. That's only if you regarding leaving it. Kidetane shachach kedera, like it teaches there in the Baita that if you forgot the pot, agab b'kiran, on top of the stove, haba b'machazir, but when it comes to returning it, efshar dechevan de avid maseh, it's possible that since he already did the deed, Shabbat on Shabbat, afilu mistamek beralo, even though it's drying out and bad for it, congealing, asur, it's forbidden. So since you don't have any benefit from this return, because it's bad for its congeals, hu mutar, therefore it's allowed. Okay, I think that's the end of the whole thing here. Aleph. Long story. Okay. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. We already did a lot of it yesterday. So we'll continue from there. So we said yesterday, right, just to recap a little bit, in the Shulchan Aruch, brought down the Ramah, that our ovens are like a stove, right? Because they're not so hot like the old ovens, the old days. So let's see in the Mishnah Berurah what he says about that. Interesting. So he brings here another opinion which says not like that. Okay, whatever. But it seems like he brings a Maharshal, right? That says that they're equal. In other words, their ovens and our ovens. Not like this opinion which says that they're not equal. Apparently, we should go like the first opinion, right? Since it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch and in the Ramah, and also brought down in Bet Yosef. Anyway, but as we said, right, our ovens today are not those ovens, because they were using wood and coal, and we're using gas and electricity, which is probably stronger. I don't know. Not sure about that. Since we're not really sure, right, we should probably go lenient. There's no reason to be stringent with this. So meaning what? That practically speaking, right, we should say that our ovens are like, their stove. They're not as hot, as their ovens. So that means we would give it the same rule as a stove, same idea. I think that's what we do. But anyway, let's move on. So then it says in Shulchan Aruch here, "Ve'im shachach v'shaha." What about if he inadvertently left it there, right on top of the stove? He wasn't supposed to leave it there, but he did. So what's the rule? In other words, what's the question, right? Are you allowed to eat this thing or not? That's the question. So, so he says like this, right? If it's fully cooked, this thing, mutar, you're allowed to. You're allowed to eat it. Even though it's good for it when it congeals. So we're not that stringent, right? B'diavad, if he forgot, and he left it there. ואם הוא תבשיל שהתחיל להתבשל ולא בשל כל צורכו. But what about something which is not fully cooked, right? Partially. Asur. So then it's asur ad Motzi Shabbat. You can't eat it until Motzi Shabbat, until Shabbat goes out. So why is that? Because you have to cook it on Shabbat, basically. But then he says, but it says if he did it on purpose and he left it there, then it will be forbidden in either case. Wow. That's interesting.
And it doesn't take into account any wasting, whether it's a financial loss or whatever.
In this case, no.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay. But I would say, that nevertheless, in our case, we're not using, the coals. We're using, in the worst case scenario, it's gas, whatever, right, or electric. So in a case like that, I would say that it's allowed to have it because of the reasons that we gave already, this week and last week, which is that we're not really, worried about the coals going down. You have to stir them, we don't have this scenario today. So therefore, it's just like we're just machmir about this, we're stringent, but it's not really halacha for us so much. Anyway, so I would say, that in our case, if you forgot, you can be lenient, no question.
Do you still have to wait until the time has passed that it would cook?
No.
Okay.
That's only when you have to be stringent. In other words, it's forbidden. So anyway, that's that. So then it goes on the Ramah, ad bichdish yasu, right? As you said, right? You have to wait till the time that it takes to do the labor. In other words, if you have to be stringent, you gotta do that too. ואם החזירה, אינו יהודי בשבת. So what about if the goy, right, returned it on Shabbat? What happens there? Keshachach v'shaha. So he says it's the same rule as somebody who forgot. That's interesting. I don't know if everybody agrees with this one, but let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. He doesn't bring anybody who argues with this, so pretty much that seems to be the halacha. Okay, so let's move on. We're almost done. Israel. So it says if it was returned by the Jew back to the fire, right? Do you know? Okay, avar v'shaha. So then it's considered to be like he did it on purpose. So if it's bad for it when it dries out, mutar, it's allowed. Because he's not benefiting from it. Some say that as long as it was cooked right, like machal ben drusai, which is right half cooked or 1/3, or she needs bashil kol tzarko, and it got fully cooked and it's good, congealing and good for it. Right, so some allow already to put it on an open flame on the stove, right? So this is Hanania, right? The opinion of Hanania that we discussed in the Bet Yosef from the Gemara. So we don't paskin like this, but it's like it's another opinion that some people did paskin this way. Haga or afilu al gavatanu, all on top of the oven. Okay, so I guess we'll stop here, Bezat Hashem. We'll continue next time. We're almost done with this halacha. We need a couple more things, so I guess we'll wait. It's not good to go too fast, it's better to go a little bit slow. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak u'baruch le'ila tov. See you tomorrow. Bezat Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.